everyone, and welcome to our webinar about logic models. My name is Xiaoyang Lo, and I'm here today with my colleague, Audrey Apia, and a few other SRDC colleagues who are helping us out behind the scenes and who are also part of the project's, the Prospects project team. Can you go to the next slide, please? I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we are meeting in a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. With gratitude and respect, I'd like to acknowledge that I am on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. From coast to coast to coast, we would like to acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call this land home. Our acknowledgement of this truth is a small but important part in honoring and showing respect for the diverse histories and cultures of Indigenous peoples in Canada. And we'd also like to acknowledge the colonial structures and the impact it has on all of our work in the settlement area. So I'll also just briefly introduce our organization. The Social Research and Demonstration Corporation is a nonprofit research organization created to develop, field test, and rigorously evaluate programs. Our two-part mission is to help policymakers and practitioners identify policies and programs that improve the well-being of all Canadians and to raise the standards of evidence that are used in evaluating policies and programs, ensuring that decisions are made based on reliable data and research. We work in a variety of topic areas, including immigration and settlement, health, Francophone minority communities, skills development, youth, and education. And we also collaborate with organizations and governments to support their work, including testing programs through experimentation, policy research, program evaluation, and performance measurement, knowledge mobilization and stakeholder engagement, and supporting organizations to build their research and evaluation capacity. This webinar is part of a webinar series that's being delivered through a project called PROSPECTS. PROSPECTS stands for Propelling to Result-Oriented Strategies in Planning, Evaluation, and Continuous Transformation in Settlement. And this project has been funded by IRCC for a period of 3 years. And the project's main goal is to support organizations delivering both direct and indirect services in the settlement sector through evaluation capacity building activities. And through our webinar series, we aim to highlight and share best practices in evaluation and research. And we hope that organizations engaging with prospects will enhance their knowledge and skills in using evaluation. One of the examples of the logic models that we'll be sharing today is one that we've created for prospects. And so we'll go into more detail later on about all the other activities that are part of this project. So over the course of this webinar, we'll be providing an overview of the different components of a logic model. We'll be looking at some of the benefits of developing and using a logic model, and we will also walk through the process of building a logic model using an example of a program that SRDC has previously designed and evaluated. And we will also look at how logic models can guide data collection and evaluation. So a logic model is a graphical depiction of a service, program, policy, or initiative, which depicts its activities, outputs, and intended outcomes, and also shows the relationship between each component. It can also depict activities at an organizational level, but this webinar will focus on program level examples. And these are some of the common components of a logic model, but you'll also find logic models that don't include all of these components. They are customizable depending on your needs and your preferences, and also who will be looking at and using your logic model. If you are including a needs column, it will include the specific needs or issues that you're trying to address through your activities. Under inputs, you will include resources like staff, funding, and materials that you'll be using to implement a program. Under activities, these are the specific actions or interventions that you are implementing to address the need, which could include, for example, delivering workshops, training, convening partners, or holding events. And the outputs are the tangible products or deliverables that are tied to your activities. These can be the number of attendees, the training curriculum that was developed, or the number of events that you held. And typically you'll want to identify at least one output per activity. And then the outcomes are the changes that you expect to occur after delivering your activities. This example gives the timeframes of 0 to 6 months, 6 to 24 months, and 2+ years for the short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. But these timeframes will depend on the nature and duration of your initiative and what outcomes you want to achieve. Immediate outcomes can include examples like changes in awareness or knowledge, while changes in confidence, behaviors, or health might take longer to occur. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so what are some of the benefits of developing and using a logic model? It can give you the opportunity to clarify your program logic and goals and allows everyone involved in delivering or evaluating the program to easily visualize the program components and what it is trying to achieve. Logic models also support planning, implementation, and learning. It can help you stay on track during program implementation, and it can also help you identify areas in need of adjustment. It can also be used as a communication tool with funders, partners, or new team members so that they can quickly learn about your initiative. And it can guide measurement and evaluation, which Audrey will cover later on in this webinar. So many of you who receive funding from IRCC may already be familiar with this logic model. I won't go through it in a lot of detail, but you'll notice that they decided to only include activities, outputs, and outcomes, and omitted the needs and inputs categories that we saw earlier. And in this logic model, the outcomes are broad enough to cover all of the activities that might fall under each category of direct or indirect services. And when you're developing your own logic models, you'll want to ensure that your outcomes are more specific to your initiative, but still align with the outcomes of your funder. And later on, we'll be showing you examples of a logic model that falls under indirect services and one based on a direct employment relevant service. And we wanted to take a moment to clarify the difference between outputs and outcomes, since it can be a bit confusing. So outputs are the direct products of program activities. For example, the number of participants who joined a program, the number of participants who completed a training, the number of workshops that were developed, the number of employers that you partnered with, or any other products or like videos, reports, or resources that were created as part of your activities. And outcomes are the changes that you expect your activities to produce. So these can include improved skills or knowledge, improved employment outcomes, improved mental health, increased collaboration, or increased capacity to provide coordinated services. And some of these outcomes might occur more quickly, while others will take more time. So the first logic model that we'll be looking at is the one for prospects. So this would fall under indirect services in the IRCC logic model. And you'll notice that we also opted not to include the needs and inputs in our logic model and instead focused on the other components. So as part of prospects, our activities include designing and delivering project activities in both French and English, engaging SPOs in consultations to shape the development of the rest of our activities and ensure that they are aligned with the SPO's needs, developing and conducting evaluation capacity building webinars and workshops, organizing and facilitating peer learning events, collecting and making evaluation tools and resources available, providing individualized support to organizations, consulting with an advisory committee to ensure that our activities remain aligned with sector needs, and also creating and disseminating a newsletter. I won't go into all of the outputs, but the idea, as I mentioned, is to have at least one output linked to each activity. So if we just look at the consultations, our outputs include the number of consultation sessions that we delivered, the number of SPOs engaged in consultations, and then our consultation findings report. For immediate outcomes, we have the settlement sector's capacity building needs are identified, participants increase their awareness of evaluation and its importance, participants improve their understanding of outcomes-based approaches, increase sector-wide access to evaluation tools and knowledge, participants find activities and tools that meet their evaluation needs, and increased peer exchange and sharing of evaluation challenges and learnings. And then under intermediate outcomes, we have increased use of evaluation in program design, management, and learning, increased confidence in implementing evaluation practices, and organizational shift toward outcome-driven practices among participating organizations. And then for the long-term outcomes, we likely won't be able to measure these, but we hope that our activities will ultimately contribute to these longer changes. So we have more adoption of outcome-driven approaches in the sector overall and more effective settlement supports for newcomers as a result. And to tie it back to the IRCC logic model, by enhancing the settlement sector's capacity to use evaluation to inform program design and delivery, we hope that through participating in prospects, organizations can better understand and address their client settlement needs. And in that way, our activities and outcomes align with the IRCC indirect service outcome, which was that the settlement sector improves capacity to provide coordinated and effective settlement support to newcomers, including equity deserving groups. So I think we mentioned earlier that we will be sending you a logic model template, and then you can use that to get started on your own logic model. It will look something similar to this. And to take you through the process of building the logic model, we'll fill out these components using a direct service employment program called the Career Pathways for Racialized Newcomer Women Pilot Project. So to give you a bit more information about CPR&W, this was a multi-year initiative testing targeted employment services for racialized newcomer women to support their successful integration in the Canadian labor market. It consisted of 12 different interventions based on 4 service delivery models and were targeted to newcomer women at different initial distances from the labor market. And the logic model that we'll be building is based on one of these 4 models called Building Canadian Work Experience. And this model was designed to provide paid short-term employment to assist unemployed racialized newcomer refugee women in gaining meaningful Canadian work experience. And it included a employment readiness training, a 75% wage subsidy to employers, and ongoing individualized support. So if we were building a logic model for this program under the needs column, we would put that racialized newcomer women have worse labor market outcomes compared to men and non-racialized counterparts. Racialized newcomer women have diverse needs and employment experiences that require targeted programming. A lack of Canadian work experience is a significant barrier to obtaining employment in Canada. And racialized newcomer women who are the most distant from the Canadian labor market require additional support to gain their first Canadian work experience. Under inputs, we would have IRCC funding, program staff, and all of their different roles, the space to actually deliver the training and the program, employer partners, the funds for the wage subsidies, and then laptops to lend to participants so that they can participate in the program activities and look for work. Under activities, we have the employment readiness training, employer engagement, supported work placement, the peer support group, and referrals to additional services and supports. And then under outcomes, we would have our training curriculum, the number of participants who completed the training, outputs, not outcomes. The number of participants who completed the training, the number of employers who provided work placements or hired participants, the number of work placements completed, and then the number of peer support sessions delivered, and the number and type of referrals made to other services and programs. And for short-term outcomes, we would expect to see increases in employability readiness, job search skills, Canadian work experience, and social networks. For intermediate outcomes, we would want to see increases in income, sense of belonging, well-being, sustained employment, and then perhaps participation in future training. And then in terms of the long-term outcomes, we hope that our activities would lead to participants obtaining commensurate employment and good quality jobs, and that participants are integrated into the labor market and Canadian society. And so putting it all together, the logic model would look something like this. And we've also added a column to tie it back to the IRCC outcomes under employment relevant services, which are that clients improve labor market knowledge, employment-related language skills, job search skills, connections, and acquire Canadian work experience. and that they are connected to the Canadian labor market, and then ultimately that they successfully integrate and settle into Canada. And now I'll pass it over to Audrey, who will talk a bit more about data collection.
Thank you, Sharon. So I will be talking about how logic models can serve as a roadmap for effective data collection. So after you have gone through the whole process of what Sharon took you through, being able to develop a logic model, how it can actually guide you in your data collection stage. So one of the most important things to remember is that your logic model is not just a planning tool, it's actually the foundation of your data collection plan. When you write your outcomes, like Sharon showed, you are already answering some of the most important evaluation questions. And this is one of the benefits that she spoke about earlier. The outcomes in the logic model gives clues about a few key things. They point you towards what to measure, who you could ask about that change, and when it would make sense to check in. So in terms of when you would do that, you saw that Sharon had short term. When it comes to outcomes, she had short term, medium term, long term. And in her examples, you saw that she had timings related to that. Short term outcomes are just looking sooner, while outcomes that take longer to unfold, meaning then you can check in later. So in terms of what you will measure, thinking about that, I think the last session of our webinar, we did talk a little bit about evaluation questions. So for those that joined that at that time, you have an idea about what your evaluation questions could be. But for those that did not join that session, this is just to let you know what evaluation questions are, which is kind of aligned with what you would want to measure. So your evaluation questions are really the driving force behind an evaluation. They describe what you ultimately want to learn about an initiative. The important thing to keep in mind is that evaluation questions are specific to each project or initiative, so they are kind of unique. They come directly from what you're trying to do and from outcomes you've already identified in your logic model. So this always links back to the logic model that you've already developed. They guide everything, including what data you collect and how you analyze and report on it. One of the key one of the things you have to know is that your evaluation questions need to be clear, they need to be useful, and be agreed upon before you start collecting data. They may already be defined for you by a funder or an existing framework. So take, for instance, if you're using IRCC's logic model, some of them could be defined already by a different, an existing framework that you already have. So the evaluation questions kind of help you keep the evaluation focused. They don't need a long, you don't need a long list of them. And the questions often depends on the scope of your evaluation that you're trying to do. So a little bit more about evaluation question subgroupings. You can have different structure of your evaluation questions. One way to do it that we have here is through having questions for different sections of your evaluation. So you can have questions for the design and implementation phase. You could have questions related to stakeholder groups. And take, for instance, you could have stakeholder group number one, that could be participants in a program. Under that, you could have questions for short-term, medium-term, long-term. Stakeholder group number two could be the staff that are involved in the program. And under that too, you could have short-term, medium-term, and long-term evaluation questions. And then you can have overall evaluation questions. So we are still talking about what to measure. So how do we move from the outcomes that Sharon has showed us to indicators? So the outcomes that you have are broadly, they are mainly conceptual. but your indicators are what translate those outcomes into evidence. The key question to ask yourself here is, how would we know this change is happening? This is what the indicator is supposed to do. This isn't just, you can have, it's not just one right indicator for each outcome. You could have multiple indicators for the same outcome, and it could be either quantitative or qualitative in nature. We are not really going to go into details about how to collect data quantitatively or qualitatively today, but there would be future webinars on that. So if you want to learn more, you can join our future webinars. So the most important thing that you should know about your indicator when you are thinking about indicator is that it should be specific, it should be observable and feasible to measure, and it should be clearly defined. And your indicator should align with the outcomes timing as well. And you can have either a quantitative or a qualitative indicator, and you can have a combination of both. So just to give you an example, based on the CPRNW pilot project that Sharon took you through to develop a logic model, this is a list of the short-term outcomes that she had listed in the logic model. So take, for instance, we have employability readiness, increase in employability readiness. An indicator could be self-reported confidence in ability to obtain employment. For job search skills, you could have increase in career decision-making self-efficacy, increase in job search clarity, increase in job search self-efficacy, and perceptions of having gained work search skills through the program. So you can see that for this specific outcome, we have about four indicators in total. Three of them can be done through quantitative data collection, and the last one can be done through qualitative data collection. And you can see that for the last two, we also have two examples of indicators for each of these outcomes. I should say here that we can also have indicators for outputs, but in this example, we are just focusing on indicators for outcomes. So the next thing to think about is, who do you even collect data from? Mostly you would want to collect data from people for whom change is expected. So if you expect to see change for participants, that is the group of people you should be collecting data from. It is also, you can also collect data indirectly from others, such as program staff or partners. They may observe changes that participants may not mention. The idea of using multiple perspectives is called triangulation. It simply means that no single data source tells you the whole story. So combining multiple perspectives might give you stronger evidence. So the key takeaway here is that you don't need to collect data from everybody. You just need to collect it from the people who are best positioned to speak to the change you are interested in. So still based on the CPRNW projects, who are the stakeholders that we could collect data from? So for the CPRNW projects, we did collect data from training participants, we did collect data from service provider staff and employer partners. Those are the three key stakeholders that we did take data from. And under each one of them, we have different ways that we collected data. But because we are not going to go into details, I have examples of ways that you can collect data here, but we'll talk about it more in our upcoming webinars. So you could have, for the training participants, we had something like focus groups or interviews, we had survey, we did photo voice. The service provider staff, we had interview, photo voice, and the service provider staff were taking admin data. And then for the employer partners, we had interviews. The last part of the process is when do you collect the data? So the choice of timing of the data collection kind of affects what you can realistically observe. So you would want to align your data collection with when outcomes are expected to occur, which is linked back to your logic model. Um, this may include a baseline data collection, and the timing itself can be based on the point in time, a program milestone, or an individual milestone. And of course, we always want to factor into when you're thinking about timing, you don't want to forget about recall bias. It is when people forget details over time. You also need to take account of attrition. So fewer people may respond the further you get away from the initiative, the time the initiative took place. And then you also have to think about the feasibility. So essentially, when you are thinking about your timing, like Sharon had, you want to take into account all these three things before you decide on a timing for when you would want to collect data. So an example of timing is basically for the CPRNW, we had, like I just showed you, we had different stakeholders. And based on the stakeholders, we did collect data at different points in time. The timing for which we collected data is bolded in here. So you will see that for interviews, when we did service with service provider staff, we were doing it annually throughout the program. We also had the interviews with employer partners. This was done one time in year 2 of the project. We also had focus groups with training participants after completion of the program. The photo voice was done with participants 1 year in year 2 of the project. And then we did have for practitioners one time in year 3 of the project. And then in the survey part for training participants, we had a baseline survey, which was at the start of the program. Then we had follow-up surveys, some at 5 months after the program and then a year after the program. So you can see that even based on the CPRNW project, we had different timings of collecting data. And this is based on taking into account recall bias, attrition, the feasibility of doing that, and our resources that we had available. So to put it all together, I know that we've been going through this whole thing. So Sharon spoke to you about starting your logic model. You would identify needs, you have inputs, activities. This is where I started from. So let's see, for instance, here I'm going through an activity of employment readiness training. And then we had a list of short-term outcomes. We had medium-term, but this example focuses on just the short-term outcome. For employability readiness, we also thought of a way of how to measure it through an indicator. An example was self-reported confidence in ability to obtain employment. From whom you could collect the data from, you could collect it from training participants. We didn't go into details about the data sources today. Like I said, this is an upcoming webinar, so you can join us to learn more about that. And then in terms of timing, we have 5 months after the program as an example for this. We also have the same thing for the other outcomes like job search skills. Like I said earlier, we had multiple indicators for that short-term outcome. We can also collect it from training participants through a survey or focus group interview. And then you can do it after the program as well. The same applies for Canadian work experience, where we have 2 indicators for that. Social network, we have 2 indicators for that. And we are collecting it from the participants as well. It could be through survey or focus group, and the timing is 5 months after the program was done. So this sort of ties it together, like I've been talking about. This is just a teaser about how you can go through a logic model yourself. I think like Shaoyan showed, you can pull out the parts, fill it, and then put it into your logic model templates, which looked nice after. This, and then you can start using it as a roadmap as to how you can measure these outcomes, and how, when you would want to measure the outcomes that you have decided on in your logic model. So we have a few upcoming webinars. We have one on incorporating evaluation in your daily activities, like your daily work, so that it becomes part of everything that you do. And then we have the one that I've been talking about. We have another one on introduction to quantitative data collection and analysis principles. The date for these will be announced soon. So we'll communicate that through our newsletter. For those that are not signed up for that, you 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 can opt to sign up for that, and you'll hear more about this. We have also had previous webinars on evaluation framework, sharing insights and performance measurement. All these are available on YouTube. And here are the links. We'll be sharing the slides with you so you can get access to these links if you want to review these, or it will help you in your learning process. So like Shayan said, this is part of the Prospect project, the webinars. As part of Prospects, we also have peer learning, which is basically right now on LinkedIn. It's a group of service provider organizations trying to support each other through evaluation. We'll be providing tools and resources to help organizations as well. And then we have the free customized support and expert advice that we are also offering to organizations. So do keep in touch. We also have a newsletter um, that we also send out upcoming activities and all that in there. So keep in touch through this if you need support as organizations. And I think that is the end of our presentation today.